Welcome back to another episode of the Odd or God Pod, where we talk about spirituality, sobriety, and everything in between. This is Eric, your host. This week, we got a very special episode. Our guest today, very pivotal guy in my program. I've known him for some time now, and he, when I first came out here to Arizona in 2020, really helped give me the foundation that I needed, and most of the relationships that I have today in my life all stemmed from, this relationship here and everything that he was able to help me out with. So without further ado, this is Paul.
Hey, Eric. I'm super happy to be here, and that's a nice introduction, but when I met you for the first time, things were a lot different, and where God's taken our relationship, I'm really excited about it, and I'm really glad that He's kept you in my life, and to see the things that you're doing today, man, it's really awesome.
Thank you, man. I remember one of my fondest memories of first meeting Paul was I remember we had this conversation and we were talking about like the concept of like a higher power. And like I think at that time I was reading some like existentialism or like what it was, and I'm trying to like explain it to him because me, like as a good alcoholic, I think I was like so super intellectual and I was just on a different plane than everybody else was. And I just remember him looking at me and be like, oh, this guy's got some work to do.
My thought is like, oh man, not another one of these guys, because we come out, we're newly sober, and we've got, usually most of us are pretty intelligent as alcoholics and addicts, as a group. It's been shown that, we're pretty intelligent, and we think we know something, and we like to hold on to that. We like to hold on to that idea because basically we've lost everything else, right? So we like to hold on to that idea that we think we know something when we're pretty smart. So we come up with these ideas, or we grasp onto these ideas that may be different from other people, just for the mere fact that they're different from other people. And wasn't the first time that I ran into it, but my reaction to that, I try not to be extreme with my reactions to that, because what I don't want to do is push people away from the truth.
Right.
And I truly believe that by example, if you experience enough people and they're walking a certain walk, that you'll be able to see the truth. And I think that that's really important. And, just by, trying to destroy somebody's ideas right off the bat, saying, no, you're wrong, this is why, without backing it up, but with walking the walk, it can be detrimental.
Oh, 100%. And I attribute a lot to my time. So Paul, a little backstory, I'm sure he'll get into it some more, but he owns and operates a network of sober living homes out here in the Mesa Chandler area. And when I got out of treatment in 2020, I was he was highly recommended that that's where I would go. And so we got in contact with him and I moved into one of his houses. And then I was there for a little under a year, getting my foundation and my feet under me, doing this whole recovery deal. And during that time, Paul's introduced me to my church that I still go to this day, the church that I was baptized in last year.
Yeah, it was a big day.
Yeah.
I still remember that day.
Yeah, and great. A lot of just some of the closest, fondest relationships that I have with people in my life today all stemmed from making that decision to go to sober living and live in that network. And, he played a huge part in that. And I'm, always grateful for that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the reason why, the reason why is because, it's really important for me to be involved in those houses. And not just like show up once a week or something, but really develop relationships with guys in the houses. It's been put on my heart, to really get to know each and every one of the guys in the houses. There's a lot of guys, man. It's like 70 guys, but it's important. You know, it's really important because if you do that, and if you have something to pass along to the next person, and they can see you walk these things out, walk them through, and see what's possible, man. You know, I just think it gives people a lot better chance to develop relationships with other people that are of like mind, right? Or you know, they get the chance to see what's possible from guys who have come before. Because I don't know about you, but you know, when I'm in the depths of my alcoholism and drug addiction, man, nothing's possible. You know, it's that hopeless state that we get into, and I don't think it can get any better than what this is right here, right now, which is pretty dark,
Right.
right? And then you get God gives you a glimpse, whether it's guys bringing in a meeting for an H&I, or whether I'm at a meeting and I see a guy that I really relate to, you know, and I see what he's become, right? What God's done in his life and who he is today. And we know, we can see who's genuine and who's not, you know? And when I see that, there's that glimmer of hope, right? And when there's hope, man, you know, anything's possible.
Yeah, man. That's just it's so great. What are you up to? 7 houses now?
Yeah, 7 houses. Looking for probably another one right now. We'll see. We'll see. You know, it's funny. You know, when I started with one house, I really had no plans on 2 houses or 3 houses, 4. I had no plans whatsoever. It was just to have one house, do it the right way, and man, it was God's plan, not mine. Because I'll tell you, 9.5 years ago, you tell me, yeah, you're going to have 7 sober living houses, and all these guys are going to have these experiences, and all these guys are going to get baptized, and even the ones that aren't going to church are staying sober, not all of them, but a good portion of them, and you're going to be able to help provide for your family with, you know, 3 felonies on your record, and being unemployable in the career that you threw away a long time ago. If you were to tell me that was going to happen, I would tell you to this day, I don't know how to do that.
Right.
You know, I just don't. I don't know how to do that. But God surely does.
That's awesome. And one more thing, and just to kind of touch on, because I tell this to so many people, and I just know it to be true. I've been in the recovery scene out here for some time, and I'd like to think I'm pretty well connected. And you know, what I see from, you know, the guys coming out of Paul's house is such like a strong sense of camaraderie amongst the houses, and the alumni that have gone through these houses and have maintained significant sobriety and like gone on to accomplish all of these things and continuously come back and stay within that you know, group of the guys who are currently in the houses is I don't know if there's much other sober livings that really have that sense of people who were in your houses 5-6 years ago that are still involved, right, with guys that are currently in your houses.
Yeah, that I feel I'm very grateful, and I feel very fortunate. But it's not on accident, right? It's by God. It's by what's really important. It's the people. It's relationships, right? It's the relationships that we build there. And you know, I don't want people coming into my house. You know, I speak to every single person before they can walk through the door of one of my houses, and I let them know in very specific terms what we're trying to do, and what it all boils down to is become better men, right? And through that, you know, knowing what the expectations are, what we're looking for, also letting them know I don't expect them to be perfect, you know, and letting them know that, you know, hey, there's a fellowship, and we want you to be a part of it, you know, and that's just it, man, being a part of it, developing these relationships, having good people in the houses, long-term managers. I have some long-term residents, as you know, that are willing to, you know, reach out their hand to the new guy. I have houses where a new guy comes in, man, and they get bombarded by guys saying, hey, you know, can I take you to the store? You know, or they make a huge meal for the house that night, and you know, more than likely, you're going to a meeting that night for sure. You know, and you need help getting to DS or whatever you want to call it to get food stamps, you need a job, we'll rally around you for that. But you have to show the willingness.
Yeah, I just I always just I always have just really really fond memories of my time spent in your houses, and I really don't think that like all of this and everything that we have going on, and even Wade, with Plugged In, all come from this program that you're running, and you're just a huge part in a lot of guys' journey, and that's just so awesome to see, and glad that you're part of mine as well. But let's just go ahead and kind of get into it. Maybe share a little bit about what it was like and what happened, and what it's like now.
Yeah. Well, you were talking real quick. I'll circle back with Wade and Plugged In, and with you running these houses. Man, it's really great to see. And that I don't claim to be the reason why, right? I just tell people, I get to be a part of, right? And I get to see this stuff. When guys get sober, stay sober. It's not because of me. I just think that I'm grateful to God that I get to be a part of that.
Yeah.
And it humbles me, to be honest with you. It's a great thing, and to see what Wade's doing, and that you're a part of that. It does. It makes me smile because I know that the heart's in the right place.
Yeah, no, we appreciate it. And just to touch on one more thing, and then I promise we'll get into your story here. But that's just, it's a testament really to how much you made an impact in all of our lives. But I think one of the biggest things too, and it's true for me, is that by the way that you live your life and your involvement in your program, I've seen you introduce God into so many of the guys' life, and that was just something that was so pivotal. In May of last year, 2020, made the decision to give my life over to Christ, and I was born again at the church that you had introduced me to, and to this day, that's where I still go, and so many others do. And what was it, just last month, there was another baptism where there was like 4 or 5 guys from the house that were giving their lives to Christ, and that to me is some of the biggest successes, right? Like that's
absolutely. I agree with you, and it hasn't always been that way, and we'll talk about that. But yeah, those things, and for you, for example, come from that first conversation on the back patio of the Pecos house. I remember exactly where we were sitting when we had that conversation. And I don't know, the spirit, the unipower, the universe. Well, I forget what type of stuff you were talking, something like that. To go from there, right? To go from there and to see you have the willingness to put aside what you thought you knew, and to really embrace the truth, right? Because I think that we all are born with a true idea of God. And I think that a lot of us, especially a lot of us alcoholics and addicts, we search for the answer, knowing that the answer is God, but trying to avoid it because of what we're doing and engaged in.
Mm-hmm. It's not the convenient answer, therefore it can't be the right answer.
No, it's not convenient, it's not easy, and I may have to stop doing some of these things that my flesh tells me, it's fun and it's good, and and that's the deal, but we've got to be, when I see, the light turn on, people are willing to accept the truth, and their lives change, right? We become new, right? Jesus changes us.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. So just wanted to put that out there, because that's it's very rare that you really see that kind of movement, and it's just something that I truly associate what you have going on, and a lot of that is.
The funny thing about that was that when I started sober living, I wasn't even going to church. That was I accepted that God existed, because he had broken me from bondage, and I didn't even know that phrase back when I got sober, right? I just know that God had a lot to do with it. I had a spiritual experience where I had accepted some really hard truth in early sobriety, sitting in a treatment center in downtown Mesa. But I still had some fight left in me. You know,
Yeah.
I still had some fight left in me, and that fight was pride and ego, and it fights against the spiritual. It really does, and it keeps me closed off from the truth. But God's grace, you know, through God's grace, I was able to stay sober by working through the process of the 12 steps, and the book did what it was designed to do, to clear away all that garbage, and show me a path to develop a relationship with God. And I thought that was enough at first, and it was enough to keep me sober for a while, working with other guys. I was big on sponsorship, right? I was big on going to meetings, big on sponsorship, big on accountability and responsibility, right? But I still had some issues, right? I still had some anger issues. I still had some pride and ego issues that were, you know, very strong. And you know, for the first 4 years of my sobriety, it was pretty good, man. It was good, right? You know, I was able to be there for my family, my kids, my wife. My wife and I's relationship wasn't the best, but it wasn't as broken as it was before, and we had decided to you know, make sure that we work on that. But after about 4 year mark, something drew me back to church, and I went under the guise of my kids needed some type of spiritual compass, right? That's what I decided to tell my wife. You know, we should really take these kids to church, because I don't want them to grow up and turn out to be like me. And maybe if we do this, that this will help. Little did I know God put that in me so that it would give me an excuse to get to church. And once I walked in the doors of Desert Springs, and Desert Springs wasn't the first church that I went to, but when I walked through the doors there, a lot of things happened right away. God moved, the Holy Spirit was there, and I think that the second service I attended, you know, I turned to my wife and I said, they were talking about the mission trip to Haiti. I'm there, I'm the second day I'm there, right? And I'm like, hey, Anna, I think I'm supposed to go to Haiti. You know, and I was pretty convicted, and it was weird because I'd never experienced anything like that. And you man, here's the thing: I'm a skeptic, you know, by nature. I'm very skeptical, and you know, I don't. It's hard for me to really just, without really seeing and experiencing it, that I don't take things, you know, at face value. I really have to see it play out. So it was a weird experience for me to be that convicted to do something that far out of the norm for me.
And that's pretty incredible. Like your second week at
Yeah.
this church, and you're like, I'm going to
Yeah,
Haiti.
and through that, you know, I met this guy named Pastor Jimmy, whose story was, he had a background a lot like mine, right? And the great thing about that, he was the first one I had coffee with after the first week I was there. The great thing about that, because, you know, he was one of us, is that I could sit across from him, look into his eyes, and I knew he was telling me the truth about God and Jesus Christ. You know, there was no doubt, and he was the person that I needed at that time to be in front of me, or else, you know, I would have just called BS and walked.
Right.
You know, because I'm good at that.
Yeah, his message had that depth and
It had
weight.
depth and weight, right, man. And then through signing up for that Haiti trip, I get introduced to Pastor Jim, who you know, the leader of the Ministry of Hope, and that group is an integral part of my walk and my education in the Bible. You know, it was something I'd never had before. I think before I went to Hope, I may have opened a Bible maybe 2 or 3 times in my life. Wasn't very many, right? And I went to Hope again, still filled with this pride and ego, thinking, oh yeah, this Hope thing, yeah, I get it. You know, they're trying to be like Celebrate Recovery, and you know, I'm going to show up there and I'm going to show them what real recovery looks like. I got 4 years, man.
I'm gonna show them.
Yeah. So, and I'm like, I'm going to go a couple times. I'm going to let them know, help them out a little bit, and then I'll move on. But 5.5 years later, it's a place that I'm called to be at pretty much every week and involved in as much as possible.
Yeah, and I remember, well, it was when I was in your houses that I was introduced to Hope, and I don't think I would have gotten to a point in my life where I knew enough about Jesus, and I knew enough about like what was going on to like be able to go and get baptized and like keep building that, and that's all attributed to going to Hope, and Pastor Jim is a huge part of that, and a lot of the other guys that are still there. And lately I've been called to serve at Celebrate Recovery on Monday nights, but I do miss
God
that
calls us
fellowship.
different places at different times, and there's people he needs us to be in front of, and we have to be obedient to that. Right now I'm still called to be at Hope, and it's still one of those things where the enemy still gets in my head, and it's like every Monday it's just like, do I really need to go to this? Been going for, and sometimes through my own thinking, sometimes through the pushing of my wonderful wife, I end up showing up.
I love that, man. That's just you gotta love that. And what I love about Hope a lot too, and I don't want to like just keep on this, but there are so many guys at Hope that have been there for 5+ years.
Yeah.
And that is the real testament to that group, is that when you go, they remember your name, they remember who you are. Like when you share, it's a men's ministry that it gave me what AA and like all the some other programs couldn't, because when I started understanding more about who my higher power was, when I started learning more about Jesus, I was less and less interested in hearing about someone's concept of praying to a tree.
Yeah.
And I was more and more interested in learning about that aspect of things. Yeah. And that gave me a space to focus on not only my recovery, but most importantly, put at the forefront of my life, and not just my recovery, but my life is serving God and what that truly means,
Yeah, it's funny, and that's really what that inspired me to start that Thursday night meeting, is loosely based on an AA format, to where people can really feel comfortable speaking about their relationship with God, and not the doorknob or the tree or whatever you want to call it. And I have no problem with people, this is where I started, but this is where I'm at today. Yeah. Because we all start somewhere, and my relationship with God started very small in the beginning, and I've sponsored men that have no relationship with God in the beginning, but the book is designed to do a very specific thing. And if they're open and honest, and they work through those steps, that's why I always support AA, always, because it does what it was designed to do.
God brings you to AA, but AA brings you to God.
That's exactly right. And I thank God for AA, because again, it did what it was supposed to do. It brought me to a relationship with God, and then it also tells me that I need to take it from there and to enlarge my spiritual life. Yeah. And for me, how do I do that, right? And we've talked about this before. In order to enlarge my spiritual life, I have to find more information, and that information's kept in the Bible. Yeah. And if I want a deeper relationship with God, I got to spend more time with Him, which means I have to spend more time in His Word. So it's a great dynamic. I love it.
And I love that you brought up your Thursday meeting, because that is by far, since coming out back to the Valley and joining, the recovery scene, that has been probably my most attended meeting out of like any of the meetings. It's one of my most consistent. And to this day, and we were even, this past Thursday after the meeting, just talking about it in the parking lot, it's like, it's so incredible that there are people from 7 years ago, 6 years ago, 5 years ago that are alumni of your houses that still make it part of their weekly routine to be present at that meeting and to know the guys who are in the houses now and to like continue like going down that path. And like then you go to service on Sunday and you'll see upwards of 15 to 20 people past and present from your houses at each service.
Yeah.
And it's like that to me is just and it's like and I holds a lot of sentiment to me because I'm also one of them. But this last time around when I came back, I remember very vividly that day, like my life had gone to shit. I ran out of money. I ran out of like places to go. I remember it was a Thursday morning and I was picking my roommate up from the hospital and I was just super drunk, whatever, at like 8:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to tell him he's got a problem as when I pick him up from the airport and I'm like, drunk and like, and I drop him back off at the place and I'm sitting there and God convicted me and I knew exactly where I was going to go that night. I knew I had like, that was it. And so that whole day I spent there and like any good alcoholic and addict, I'm getting myself right? Because it's like, this is it.
Yeah,
and,
man, I know that. I know.
And then I'm like, okay. And I show up to that meeting and I remember there was like 8 people there. Paul wasn't even there. And I was just like, what? Like, I was like, this can't be it. But I knew, like, it was literally the beacon. I knew exactly where I needed to be. And I went to that church and that on that Thursday night. And even with you not being there, I saw some people that I've known for a long time, dear friends of mine. And I made that phone call and you were able to get me in like right away. And
yeah. And that's just part of what God does. I mean, and it's again just one of those things that I'm humbled to be a part of, and for people to know that they can come back and man, just that whole thing. I was talking about going back to church and going to Desert Springs. I don't think I was there for but a couple months, and they give me a key to the place to have a meeting there, and it's great. And the cool thing about that is that, you know as well that I don't push my faith on other people. I let them see by example what's possible, what's available to them, right? And even the guys on Thursday, a lot of them don't go to the church, but I let them know that if they need a church, this is their church, and they have a spiritual home. And that I'm grateful for, Desert Springs, always will be, for giving us that spot. And they appreciate the guys from the houses coming, and they value them, and they're not just alcoholics and addicts. They're members of the church.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. And I remember like I didn't start going to church right away or anything either, but you always were like, we need help moving chairs, we need help setting up, and that's how they wrangle you in. So you'll show up and you'll start helping moving chairs, and the next thing you know, you're going to service every now and then, and
you
the
get
next
to meet some people who aren't alcoholics and addicts, and you're like, hey, well, maybe this isn't what I thought it was.
Right.
And we need to see that.
Yeah, and then you find yourself there Sunday, Monday, and Thursday every week. Yep.
Yeah, it's good stuff, man. It's great.
I love it. So, but yeah, man, I mean, this has been good so far, but I do want to just give you a chance to maybe share a little bit about your story and, kind of go from there.
Well, yeah, let's get into that a little bit. Looking at it from the perspective of where I'm at today, it looks a little bit different. The victim mentality of the whole situation has gone by the wayside quite a while ago. My reactions to things that happened in life were extreme, and were extreme for me to self-medicate, to self-sabotage, to do all these things, right? And I say this often, is that my childhood wasn't great, man, but there's millions and millions of people who have much a much more difficult childhood than I did, and they don't become, hopeless alcoholic and addict like I did. It's just the way that I chose to respond, whether I was, pre-wired to be an alcoholic, and I don't know the answer to any of that stuff. It doesn't matter. It's what happened, That's what matters.
What matters is you turned into one at some point. So
yeah. So it doesn't matter. But yeah, my child, and the things that happen with people like us. I don't want to speak for you, but for people like me, when bad things happen to me, and I don't have somebody, trying to make it right or trying to tell me, yeah, you're right, and it's, when things happen to me, I use those things as justification to do whatever the heck I want to do, and whatever I want to do is to do whatever is going to make me feel different and feel good in the flesh sense right here, right now. Drugs, women, gambling, whatever it may be. And that's how I responded to all of these things that happened in my life. My dad passed away when I was 10, and I didn't, I didn't have an explanation from anybody and why that would happen to me. And it was, tight, we grew up poor, whatever you want to call it. I don't really like to say much about it because, when it's all said and done, it wasn't that bad. It could, like I said, a lot of people have it a lot worse, and I see that today. Although if you talk to me back then, nobody had it as bad as I did. And I'm an introvert by nature. I was an introverted kid, and the alcohol, drugs, the old story, it helped me fit in and all of that stuff. And I became a big party guy, and that became part of my identity, right? Because I didn't know who I was. And I drank and used it for 30 years, man. I didn't get sober till I was 45, 54 now. That's a lot of years. And I say that, a lot of those years I was functional, right? You quote unquote functional. I don't truly believe in functional alcoholism because there's a lot of damage being done to somebody, including yourself, and that's not functioning. I may be able to, pay some bills, have some stuff, and make it look okay sometimes on the outside, but that's not functioning. Mm-hmm. But I'll use that term loosely for the time being. So I was able to do some things, and that for me is unfortunate, right? Because I'm able to stand on those things. I get promoted a couple times in the finance industry. I've got some job titles, and that's enough for me to stand on that hill and say, hey man, I don't care what you say, I'm doing okay, and it doesn't matter what I'm doing outside of work. Look what I'm doing, look what you're doing. And that's a bad place to be, man. Yeah. It really is. It's not good. It's not good for the egomaniac with the inferiority complex, right? Because that just feeds it. And it feeds the delusion that I can do whatever I want and everything's going to be okay. And back then, man, in the late 80s and in the 90s, that whole party, finance party.
It was like Wolf of Wall Street.
Yeah, it was goofy. And and you can hide it, but you can only hide it. If you're a true alcoholic, you can only hide it for so long.
And you don't hide it very well, looking back on it.
You think you do, man, but you don't, man. And there's so much damage that we do that we, just, we're delusional about, and we can rationalize it out, but yet we're hurting people really badly, and to be able to just gloss over that, is part of this disease. That it's a really hard part to look back at. It makes me uncomfortable when I think about it, because there's a lot of people that aren't in my life today that I hurt really badly, and I'm not that same person today, and I don't carry around any guilt or shame for it. But those things that I did make me feel uncomfortable, and they should, because, I did those things, you know. Um, I know that God's forgiven me for them. Whether those people did or not, you go and make amends, forgiveness isn't part of that deal, that's up to them. But I know God has forgiven me for it. But it makes me uncomfortable, and I wish that it didn't happen. But I'm not in the delusion that any of that would have been any different. The great thing about all of those years where I created all that wreckage and the hostages and the damage, and both financial and to other human beings, is that today God has taken all of that, right, and all of my experiences, and has turned it, into me being uniquely qualified to be able to help people. And that's what God promises and Bob works all things for the good. He can take any one of us that are, and I was, man, you ask my wife, you heard her that one time on her birthday, you ask her, I was as broken as anybody, if not more so, right?
I absolutely loved that. We had a little celebration, and I wouldn't even call it a little celebration. It was, Paul had just celebrated 9 years of sobriety, and there was I would say about 50 people. What do you think, about 40, 50?
Yeah, somewhere in there.
Yeah, I mean, it was a very good group of guys that from all aspects of people that he's been able to build genuine relationships with over the years, and hearing everyone stand up and say some words about him, and then his wife said kind of closed it off, and it was just, that was such a great experience, kind of seeing that, man. And
she was, there's no way for her not to believe so strongly in God, Jesus, because what she has seen happen. I'll put it to you that way. And what she experienced firsthand, and not thinking that there was any way that I could be changed or saved. And for life to be the way that it is today, it's impossible. She would tell you it's impossible for her not to believe.
Right. And it's that's something that I kind of wanted to touch on as well, because it's today and well, pretty much since the whole time I've known you for the past 3.5 years, you've been you're known as a great father, a great husband, right? And even before this episode, when we were out back, we're talking about, your daughter's soccer game and all of these things, but it wasn't always that way.
No, it wasn't. No, I've told this part before, I'm in the hospital for the birth of two of my kids, and I'm in the middle of my alcoholism, and I'm I've got this plastic bottle of Coke filled up with just enough Coke to make sure that nobody knows it's pretty much straight vodka, right? And I'm sitting there and I'm drinking that, during this delivery of my kids, man, and throwing down Vicodin and Percocet, whatever I needed to do. And then, on top of that, and not being able to be mentally present for the birth of my kids, I'm really pushing to, get my wife out of the hospital as soon as possible, because I want things to get back to the way that they're supposed to be, which is me at the house, drinking the way that I want to drink. With no regards to anybody or anything other than myself, the epitome of selfishness and self-centeredness. And I saw my family as an inconvenience at times, unless, they were doing exactly what I wanted them to do, actor scenario, right? Doing exactly what I wanted to do, and even then I wasn't happy.
Right.
But yeah, I was not a good husband. I was not a good father. But God gave me the opportunity to be closer to the man that he made me to be. And I have to remember that, and I did. I got that opportunity, when my last daughter was born. I was sober for that. He gave me that opportunity, and that you know, I don't think about it enough, but you know, I'm truly grateful for that. Um, she has never known me to have a drink, ever, and I got to spend, because I was unemployable, right? Because of all these, you know, felonies and all this other stuff, and didn't know what I was going to do. And I got to spend a lot of time with my younger daughters, you know, watching them during the day, taking them to daycare, you know, taking them here and there. And then when I started the houses, right, they got the firsthand view of that thing developing.
Right.
You know, I hesitate to call it a business because to me, you know, it's more than a business to me.
Right.
But they get to see that develop, man, and
How is that? Like, I imagine like how do you explain that to them? Like, oh yeah, I have a bunch of houses of like a bunch of alcoholics and addicts, and we're helping them just like get sober and teaching them how to live. Like, what does that conversation look like?
It's funny because I think even my 9-year-old could have a conversation with you about alcoholism and sober living houses and how we do things. Because I get phone calls in my truck and they're in the truck with me, right? I get phone calls at home and I don't walk away because I don't feel convicted to do that. I feel like they need to see what this is like. I don't know if need to see is the right phrase, but I'm not afraid for them to see it, you know? And they understand everything from, you know, guys not doing their chores to, you know, I'll get off the phone with a guy after I tell him, hey man, I'm giving you the opportunity to get honest with me. You know that conversation.
Yeah.
You know? and I'll hang up the phone and I'm like, so what do you guys think? You think he was being honest with me? And their responses are funny sometimes.
Usually no.
Yeah, usually no. And but yeah, they know what I do and they know the seriousness of it and I don't hide it from them. I try to watch my language when I'm talking with these guys, but you know, sometimes with the newcomer, you know, they're harsh conversations, and I let them hear that too.
Yeah. And that's just like when you're in like a sober living environment, we are just as alcoholics and addicts, we're undisciplined. We live very undisciplined lives, and
absolutely.
So a lot of what it takes in those early days is that very like firm structure of you're going to wake up, you're going to make your bed, you're not going to hang around at the house all day, you're not going to make a mess. Like it's like all of these fundamental skills that you know, I should have known at 24 years old and I didn't. And now I go into this house, you know, it's tough. And then you have this conversation.
I mean, it's like, you know, we like to, the days of us being able to say these little things don't matter when we're to that point and trying to get sober, those days are over. Because all the little stuff matters. Because when we're trying to rebuild ourselves and let God do his work in us, these things are important. You know, I remember one of our friends, Garrett, always brings this up. He's like, Paul, I remember when you used to come into this house and you used to go over the chore sheet and you used to lecture us about, you know, how doing your chore is a reflection on your program and your sobriety. And, you know, a lot of us would you know, you kind of look at each other and say, you know, I think that's a little much. But today they would tell you it is.
Right.
You know, and there comes a point where there's a realization and that switch turns on and you're like, oh, it is. Mm-hmm. You know, it's all important, man. It's all important because we are undisciplined, because we don't know how to follow through, right? We don't know how not to take shortcuts, right? We don't know how to not justify, well, I did most of it, but I forgot to sign. So yeah, it's important, you know, and you know, I'll be honest with you, most of the guys, you know, understand it. Getting them to follow through with it's a little bit more difficult, but you know, it's just another step down the path, you know.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. I remember there was like a couple of times. I remember one time there's this guy that we both know. His name's Aaron, and he was like managing this house, and I was like out and like hanging out in like a hot tub or something, and like I was gonna be late for curfew, and he's doing what any good house manager would do and being like, no, you need to be home on time. And me being there for like 10 months, I think I'm above the rules, and so I'm like, call Paul right now, call him at 11 at night, tell him what's up, dude, see what he says. And then he's like, no, dude, like, no, turns out I need to be home by curfew. turns out 10 months of sobriety doesn't qualify me to not follow the rules.
Yeah.
So it's funny because it's like, being free from drugs and alcohol is only such a small part of what recovery actually is.
Yeah.
And like, I'm still an undisciplined, fearful, egotistical person with or without drugs, right? And sometimes without drugs and alcohol, it's even amplified because I don't even have what my coping mechanisms used to be to like suppress those things. And so I'm just flying off the rails. And then that's when I, come to realize, if I'm lucky, right, is that I need to rely on God. And like, that's why the whole point of this is like, I need to keep growing in my relationship with God, or else I'm going to regress back into all of those.
Yeah, I'll tell you, you're just speaking on that, and it made me realize something that, my walk in my faith, taught me to be more patient with early sobriety, because, after 4 years in sobriety, going through those years, having a couple sober living houses at that time, I became impatient with guys, not being able to follow through with what they agreed to do, and started to become jaded, and that's where I said my anger and my pride and ego started coming into play, and there'll be people that, were in the houses back in those days that will tell you, and when I started, going, walking my faith, and hope and all this other stuff, they'll tell you that they saw the change, and I never claimed to change or do. It's just one of those things, like when you do the steps and other people see things in you that way before you do, right? And it's all God's timing, because, I needed to change, or else it wasn't sustainable, right? Being that jaded about things, and that impatient and that angry about situations, would have caused a breakdown somewhere.
Right. It's so awesome. And like I've heard some stories. I think for me, I like came in right at I came in the church Paul era.
Yeah.
So I mean, all I know is just from when I first met you to now, but like you were already down that path, but I never got to experience the pre-church era.
Yeah. But I was talking about, a story, the 30 years of drinking, using drugs, and starting to pile on consequences, and making some really bad decisions that caused me legal trouble and felony charges, and using that as entitlement, because look at how unfair this is to me. Now I can't work in my field. All of these things, man, it's just a complete crap show, man, and so delusional, so deep into that delusion that I couldn't see it. And, all I was convinced as an alcoholic is that I just need more and I'll be okay. More attention from women, more time at the casino, more cocaine and alcohol, and more money, and I'll be okay. It'll fix everything. But, or a better job title. I was big on job titles.
Yeah. The prestige.
Validation, man, through this material world was one of my big things. It really was, and it's deadly. It is. It almost got me. And I didn't even know it. I was just doing what I was told to do by this world, right? You go out, get yours, man.
Yeah.
Whatever, go get yours. The more money, the more value you are as a person, and it's just not the truth, And I'm glad that God was still there for me, you know, because there are times in when you're contemplating, you know, whether or not you want to wake up or come to in the morning, you know, and you think that it's better off that you don't, that you wonder if he's still there, you know, and it's been proven over and over again that he is.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. And like another thing too that I kind of wanted to just touch on, and you touched on it a little bit, but it's like the progression of your interactions with people early in sobriety. And it's like I see that because I manage a sober living house now, and it's like not gonna lie, like the first like 2 or 3 months of like doing this, I've noticed that same thing in me, where it's just like, I don't understand what you're not understanding about this. You know what I mean? It's like, get on board, or like, you know. Yeah. And then I've got to remember that it was like, it wasn't too long ago that I was that guy in your house that was just like, well, like not doing my chore.
Yeah,
like,
didn't want to pick up your clothes.
Yeah, like, and I was just
didn't
like,
want to be quiet during quiet hours. Yeah.
Yeah, like, and I'm just like, that's you, dude. It's like, that was you. It's like, I had to like go through that and have somebody hold me accountable and like go through and learn all of those things that like are innate to me now, but it's like they weren't innate, they were learned skills. And so like showing that grace and like understanding that, you know, being in sober living specifically, it's like you're taking somebody in at such like a pivotal moment in their lives. And like they
can go either way.
Yeah.
Really, they can go either way. And do I want to be there to love them and love them enough to hold them accountable, but give them an opportunity for God to work in their life?
Yeah.
Or do I want to just, you know, hammer them and run them off?
Right. And you know, being in a manager position, it's like a big thing. It's like every single day I have that decision. Am I going to live in my will, or is it going to be God's will? Am I going to allow my differences of personality affect how I treat this person, or am I going to live by the principle, or am I going to live by the principles laid out in this program? Am I going to am I going to live in love and tolerance? That's my code. Or am I going to allow my, you know, dislike of certain character attributions of people dictate how I treat them in the houses, right? And it's like, that's a daily struggle. And like, you know, it's something that every single day I find myself having to rely on God and be like, look, God, like, this guy's doing this stuff that's annoying me, but who am I to strip him of an opportunity to be here and like not show him some grace, or not allow him some time to like really try to get what's going on? Because I'm so quick to judge sometimes. I'm so quick to write people off. And I remember, like, what if I was just written off? I probably wouldn't be here.
Yeah, it reminds me that, you know, at any time God could have been like that with me, right? Like, this guy's never going to get it, although he's all knowing he knew that I was going to, right? But all signs tell you that he's not going to get it.
He's not the one.
He's not going to get it, man. Or just like my wife, right? Her story, you know, this is not going to happen. It's impossible, right? And we've both seen people where we both look like this guy.
There's no way.
This guy here, this guy here, there's no way. And it happens. And it happens. And they're strong, and they're part of our fellowship now, right? And they're strong in it, right? And I have to remember that, right? Because it happens. God, there's nothing that God cannot do, and I've seen it, man. No. And that's a good point that you bring up, and it is, and it's hard for the managers, and I know it is, because it's daily. You're daily faced with this, right? And I have to talk through it with a couple of my guys every once in a while, like, listen, man, and I have to remind them, you know, you were once that dude, remember? This isn't your first time in my house. Yeah. You know, it just so happens the second time around you got it. God got a hold of you, right? And I'm like, now we got to give this guy a chance.
Right. And it's like one of the most beautiful things in like this like category of like sober living is to see someone come in and they're pissed off at the world. They're better than sober living, and the only reason why they're there is because of this, that, and this, and they're only going to be there. My favorite.
I'm only be here for 30 days.
Yeah, my favorites. I'm only going to be here for 30 days, then I'm going back. And like to see those people And then after like being in sober living for a while, say, you know, I think I'll stay for 90 days, or like I think I'll stay for 6 months, and they end up being there for like a year, and they go on, and you still see them around, and they're like a big part in the community. And it's like, I remember that guy when he first showed up, and it was like, that was not it. This guy was just gonna do his 30 days, go back to his apartment, and somehow be cured.
Yeah.
And it's just that's like one of the most beautiful things about it, man. But then on the other side of the coin, being in sober living, is you see a lot of the ones who don't make it.
We've got to have some discernment, you know, and God's blessed me with some discernment. You know, there's a difference between the spirit of a person. You know, some guys are just I can work with a guy who doesn't you know, do his chore, doesn't, you know, go to all his meetings a couple weeks, and, you know, maybe have a crappy attitude once in a while or talks back, but there's not a complete meanness to his spirit. You know what I mean? He doesn't really want to cause harm. He's just hasn't gotten there yet. But then there's the other, and it exists, and they're just not ready to be around other people because they will cause harm. No. And it's, you know, we have to determine that, and you know, unfortunately, for me, you know, it's just not the place for them right now. You know, when you're fully exhausted and you're ready to surrender, some of that meanness and so I'm just gonna call it what it is, evil spirit, man. Then we'll talk.
Yeah, man. It's and that's like a big thing, because you see both sides of it. And like, also it's just, you know, they I remember someone telling me like, you'll go to more funerals than weddings, you know, like when I first like came out here. And that's another part of recovery and being in like specifically like sober living. It's like you run into so many people, right? Because it's like, chances are, like, you know, there's a lot of people who will be at one of Paul's houses. Maybe it didn't work out. 6 months later, they wind up at a plugged in house. But it's like, you start knowing so many people, right? Even if it's just on a surface level in the community. And when you're in that position to like have that wide of a network, you hear a lot about like a lot of the deaths and the more tragic side of things. And that for me kind of is like keeps me remembering exactly what we're doing as well in those times where it's like, it's important to have that, it's important to have grace, and it's important to work with guys, but it's also important to uphold that level of accountability and understand that it's like, there's a fine line between showing someone grace and enabling them to continue doing behaviors that could be potentially fatal.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, because you have a number of other guys that you're accountable to, you know, and you know, and they're not just paying for a place to crash, you know, they're paying to be held accountable, and for other people to be held accountable, and you know, giving them a safe environment to work on their recovery is really, you know, paramount.
Yeah, man. Well, this has been great, dude. I just love having times to sit down and talk with you. And also, just a quick side note, I wanted to throw this in there. So Paul's one of my good golf buddies, and I'll tell you what. So I picked up golfing, you know, like early in sobriety. I bought this like cheap little set of clubs, and I started going. And I remember the very first time like you invited me golfing, that I literally had that like I made it feeling. I was just like, oh my God, Paul wants to golf with me. I was like, I'm moving up in the world.
Oh, man.
Like something's happening. But it's some of the best times, man. And I really do enjoy like having access to run things by you, and like, even like when I mess things up, like even earlier today before this podcast, I'm like telling him about some things where it's like, yeah, I probably owe some amends. I didn't really handle that the best way, but it's like, that's the beauty of it, man, is that we don't have to be perfect. We just have to be honest.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it, man.
Yeah,
that is. And you know, the cool thing about it, Eric, is my relationship with you is that that, you know, you're really transparent with me, and you know, you're pretty wide open with me, and I appreciate that. That's what allows us to build relationships when we're open with other people, and it's not recommended that we're like that with everybody.
Right.
We can't be, you know, but we have to be with some people,
Yeah.
you know, in order to for this thing to work. We do. So yeah, it's really cool.
That's awesome, man. Well, as we kind of wrap up here, I did want to say, I mean, do you have, for any potential viewers that may be on the fence about recovery or on the fence about going to treatment or going to sober living or just like reaching out and seeking help, do you have any words for them?
Yeah, you know, I get asked about that. You know, my experience with going to treatment, it's all based on ultimatums and consequences of my actions, and I'm grateful for that. But it doesn't have to be that way, you know. And you know, I was talking earlier about the state of hopelessness, right, where it's never going to get any better than it is right now. So I might as well just keep continuing to do what I'm doing. That's a lie, and if you could just see through that lie for just a moment, and just make a phone call, man. It's just, you know, if we want things to change, we have to do different things, and that's really all that there is to it, man. And I know it's difficult, and I fought it for a long time, and I try to tell people you don't have to. It doesn't have to go on and on and on. It doesn't have to. We can make that decision, and even if that window just opens up for a little bit, for a short period of time, make the phone call and go. You know, this stuff is always waiting for you. It's always waiting for you, and you can always, you know, go back to it. But, you know, there is hope. I've seen lives changed. I've seen, you know, and when I see lives change, you know, for me, that's a miracle, you know, and I'm grateful, been blessed to see so many miracles that I know that if we just make a little bit of an effort, God can take over from there. And, you know, I remember people used to tell me in those first 4 years I was trying to get sober and I couldn't really get it. I was a chronic relapser. You know, people used to tell me a lot of stuff and I always blew it off because I knew better, right? But I remember one thing, and people used to tell me that, you know, if you get sober, you know, your life can be better than you could ever imagine it, right? And I used to imagine some really cool big things, right? And I'm like, that's a nice saying, you know, but I don't really think that that's really possible. But I am here to tell you, you know, honestly, you know, you get sober, anything's possible. Anything's possible. And I truly believe that, and I'm living that right now. Like I said, you compare my life to 9.5 years ago to where it is today. You would say that that's not possible, that it's just not. And I know that, you know, a lot of guys in the houses that come in nowadays, it's not easy for them to imagine what my life used to be like. And I like to share with them, you know, on a one-to-one or a small group basis, you know, what it was really like, so they know. And I'm not saying that my life is better than somebody else, you know, but, you know, you can be reasonably happy. You know, and that's all my expectation. If I do these things that God wants me to do, and I try to become the man that He designed me to be, and I'm of service, which is what I believe that I was put on this earth to do, you know, I can be reasonably happy, and I can understand that my life, while I'm here, I have a job to do, and I can be obedient to that, and that the struggles that I go through today, they have a purpose. And you know, being reasonably happy and helping people gives my life purpose to where before I didn't have any other purpose other than trying to fulfill the world's idea of what success is.
Right.
You know, and it's an amazing thing, but it just starts with the first step, and you know, reach out for help. There's so many people that want to help you, and man, just try for just a little while, just a little bit, to lay aside your pride and ego, and man, there's just such a better life out there for you. God wants a better life for you. Everybody around you wants a better life for you. Man, just reach out. It's we see the successes, but we also see the other side of it, and that's it's heartbreaking when I have to go to a funeral and see a man's 8-year-old daughter there. That's heartbreaking. Because I know what can happen out of that situation, and it doesn't have to be that way. We can make different choices, and I hope they do.
Yeah, man. And as you're saying that, I just like remember the last part of like the full version of the Serenity Prayer. It's like just reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with you in the next.
Yeah, because we all think that this is it right here in the material world, right? But it's not. But I have a job to do while I'm here,
right?
And I'm going to do it.
Oh, man, well that's awesome, and we thank you so much for coming on the pod.
Yeah, thanks
man.
for having me, and I hope that anything that I said may have helped somebody out there.
That's awesome. And you guys know, quick shout out before we end the episode to our sponsor, Plugged In Recovery. If you or somebody you love are looking for a sober living home, just reach out 612-505-5494 or www.azsober.com. Also, we'll put Paul's information out there too. If you guys liked what you heard and maybe want to check his program out, I definitely recommend it. I'm an alumni and have nothing but good things to say about it. So thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and click the notification bell so you know every time we're posting. And we'll see you next week.
Great. Thank you.